Will the Bobcats be lighting up the scoreboard, or are they still missing a few light bulbs? It's Locked On Sunbelt.
You are Locked On Sunbelt, your daily podcast on the Sunbelt Conference, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to another edition of Locked On Sunbelt, your team every day. I am your host, Dave Schultz. This episode is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook, the official sportsbook of Locked On. Make every day moment more. Visit FanDuel.com/Locked On today to get started. All right, the move continues. We shifted areas. We'll have some artwork up for the next time. We are joined by Keff Ciardello from the Austin-Statesman. He is the Texas State Bobcats beat writer. He'll recap spring football and the spring game. And interesting, the title of this is going to be Explosiveness Before Consistency, and which actually disappoints me. I was kind of looking for consistent explosiveness, but that is understandable with a new coach, a new quarterback, and a whole new system. And so looking forward to hearing what Keff Ciardello says about the Texas State Bobcats. Welcome back to another edition of Locked On Sunbelt, your team every day. I'm your host, Dave Schultz, and from the Austin-Statesman, he covers the Texas State Bobcats. It's Keff Ciardello. Keff, when GJ Kinne got the job, he said, as the new head coach of the Bobcats, they were going to light up the scoreboard. Are they lighting up the scoreboard, or do we have to add a few more light bulbs?
Well, yesterday, it was a very vanilla base scheme package on both sides of the ball. And GJ, he talked about that in the press conference afterwards, that they didn't put everything out there that they could have. Even on defense, they weren't blitzing a whole lot, not a whole lot of pressure. On the offensive side of the ball, they were zone blocking. They weren't doing their run gap schemes that they're going to introduce, I think, more in the fall. Quarterbacks weren't allowed to be tackled. So it wasn't like you'd see some of the other spring games from like Oklahoma and Colorado yesterday, where it was a little bit more. It was different deal. It was more about preservation of health, I guess. But that being said, I wouldn't say lit up the scoreboard. They did find the end zone. They put up points, and they didn't turn over the ball, which I think is a pretty good indicator that it's heading in the right direction. They had something like 16 plays that went over 10 yards, which was pretty big for the offense. The lack of turnovers is really good for this team. If there is a concern, it's with the offensive line. There was quite a bit of sacks for the defense, which is really concerning when if you take into account what I just said about that they weren't pressuring a whole lot. They weren't blitzing. They just had a 4-down front, and they were still able to get sacks. Ben Bell himself had 4 sacks, and he's a terrific player, but 4 sacks in a game is it's a lot higher than we're usually seeing him play. So I think there's some more issues with that offensive line, and maybe the zone blocking deal like they were doing played into that as well. But I wouldn't call it lighting up the scoreboard, but I don't think you need to invest in more light bulbs. I just think they intentionally didn't flip on some switches, but maybe we'll see it more in the fall.
Was that intentionally to keep it secret, right? Because, there's nobody more paranoid, I think, in the history of the world than college football coaches, or just keeping it simple because it's new for everybody. With all the transfers in, it's new quarterbacks, it's new coaching staff. Let's just get the basics down, and we'll work towards where we need to be at the beginning of September later.
Yeah, I think it's a caveat of all of that, plus health. I mean, I think they don't want to reveal too much of their scheme before everything comes out. They don't want to throw too much at these new players right off the bat, because it is a pretty complex offense. I mean, when you hear him describe it, when it's just like, if they put too many in the box, we're going to throw it. If they drop back, we're going to run it. That seems pretty simple, but there's a lot that goes in between everything, a lot of pre-snap reads from the quarterback. So they probably didn't want to throw too much there. And then the third part of that is the health situation. They didn't have a ton of injuries this spring, but they had enough that made them cautious, where especially on the offensive line, they had a couple guys, not really starters, but they had a couple of guys in their depth that didn't participate in the spring game because of injuries, and some other new guys that came in. So I think it has to do with all of that. They looked at the pros and cons of the whole situation of don't want to reveal the scheme, don't want to throw too much at these guys right off the bat. and preserve that health. So made for I wouldn't call it a boring spring game. It was still, I still got to see a lot, got to know a lot about this offense, got to see Malik Hornsby, which was very anticipated. He's the Arkansas transfer at quarterback, former 4-star guy. Get to see what he looks like in this offense. And he had some flashes in that spring game that I hadn't seen in practices in spring leading up to it. And we got to talk to him on Thursday, and he said that it was a lot to take in, and he was having some, not trouble, but it was a lot to get to know right off the bat. And in the spring, leading up to the spring game, he was like, "I'm feeling great now. I'm ready to showcase it." And in practices where we'd see him turn over the ball before, no turnovers yesterday. And he had a lot of plays, some with the first unit, some with the second unit. He'd go back and forth with the first unit with CJ Rogers, but it really seems like Malik Hornsby is that guy and has separated himself in the coaches' minds. So it was still good to see that displayed with the offense, and to see how they would it's a much faster paced offense, and they want to dictate the tempo, go fast, go slow, but we got to see a lot of the fast yesterday, where a play ends and they hustle to the ball and they keep it going, and that was definitely much faster. I mean, even when they were doing 11 on 11, it was just offense versus defense, a scrimmage style. It wasn't like they broke it up into two teams. So as soon as one drive would end, the next one would start real quick. I mean, like, I was there taking notes, and there was no break in between. It was like, bam. I mean, they were even practicing it in that scenario where it's like, okay, you guys go now. So it was good to see that. Got to take away some of that, and got to take away some of the 4-2-5 defense. The new defense coordinator, Jonathan Pack, he's introducing. They had a 3-man front last year. Now they have a 4-man front with the personnel on the D-line. I mentioned Ben Bell, some other guys that had some really good days. You could see that 4-2-5, I think, fits better with this personnel. So it's good to see that.
We'll be back with more with Keff Ciardello from the Austin-Statesman, the Texas State Bobcats beat writer. What comes first, the consistency or the explosiveness? But first, let me tell you about FanDuel. What a great time it is to join FanDuel. Grand slams, no hitters. Drew Smiley, almost a perfect game. Ouch. And double plays are back. And there's no better place to get in on the MLB action than FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. That's because right now, new customers can step up to the plate with a no-sweat first bet up to $1,000. Just go to FanDuel.com/lockedon to sign up. Place your first bet and get up to $1,000 back in bonus bets if you don't win. So don't miss your chance to get a no-sweat first bet up to $1,000 when you join FanDuel today. Just go to FanDuel.com/lockedon to sign up. FanDuel, the official partner of Major League Baseball. All right, Dave Schultz, back with more Locked On Sunbelt, your team every day. Let's get it back with the Texas State Bobcats beat writer for the Austin-Statesman, Keff Ciardello, talking about the consistency versus the explosiveness of GJ Kinne's offense. Keff Ciardello with the Austin-Statesman he covers the Texas State Bobcats. It's Locked On Sunbelt. All right, so what is GJ Kinne's expectations? Because, I'm looking forward to an explosive offense. ODU brings in, the high-powered offensive coordinator from Fordham that led FCS in scoring. But somewhere along the way, you do have to learn to, crawl, walk, and then run. And South Alabama is a great example of that. They were inconsistent in the first year under Kane Womack, and they were a little bit better last year, a lot better last year. But, as far as I'm concerned, they need to be more consistently explosive, and, that'll be this year. What is the expectations of GJ Kinne and the Bobcats, looking for, consistency versus explosiveness? Because sometimes consistency, it'd be nice to be able to score every time, but somewhere along the way, we need to get, 3 or 4 first downs just to flip the field.
Sure. And, I think the explosiveness will come before the consistency with this team. They'll be able to have some of those plays that'll pop in this offense. I think it's going to take some time to get that consistency down. I think that it might be getting hopes too high if you're looking at Incarnate Word and what GJ Kinne did last year and thinking that's just going to completely come over to Tech State and Bobcats are going to average 50 points a game. I think it's going to take some time to get there, at least a year to get it to get the system really under control here. Well, I think right off the bat, though, expectations for this season for Kinne is it's going to increase the offense. It's at least going to put more points on the board because that's where they really struggled last year and years prior is to just even get an offense going and scoring. I don't think they're going to put up like 50 a game, but I could see them getting close to the 30s, maybe even to the 30s per game, which would be a big jump up for this program. It's what it's needed. Defense was the strong point last year. They lost a lot of defensive guys, but they brought in quite a bit, and they're retained some guys like Brian Holloway and Ben Bell that have really showed some stuff this spring that I think their defense will still be pretty strong in this 4-2-5 and everything. But offensively, I think that's going to take a little bit of time. It will improve though. It looked improved this spring. I mean, the no turnovers thing right off the bat is an improvement from what the offense did last year. It was, or even into the spring when you'd see them go up against the defense, they were turning over the ball pretty often. And to go, it was about 10, 11, 12 drives with no turnovers, not including 3 and outs or like a stop on 4th down, because they would have that. That did happen a couple times, but no like true turnovers like a fumble or an interception or anything like that. But, maybe if they let Ben Bell actually tackle a quarterback, maybe he would have knocked the ball loose. I mean, he was back there quite a bit. I'm sure you remember Levi Bell from last year. He's a good chance of getting drafted coming up. This is his brother. And so his younger brother, and he's looking just like Levi. He put on a bunch of weight like him, looking terrific out there.
I presume, obviously the biggest difference between last year's Incarnate Word team and this year's Texas State Bobcat team is a 25-year-old quarterback versus a 19-year-old quarterback. Lindsey Scott Jr., this guy was, again, really bitter about him not going to Syracuse. That's the whole thing. I mean, the other quarterbacks that were in his class or even in the next class are not even playing college football anymore. That's how long he was playing. And so we'll give Malik Hornsby a little bit of time to grow up a little bit, but it is his job, right? Was there a quarterback competition, or it was just his job flat out?
That's a really good point that I hadn't actually even thought of. Lindsey Scott, the age difference between Scott and Hornsby, and taking on this system. A guy
right.
who is more experienced like Scott. You could see how he took to it in his first year there, and boom, magic happened. But because I think the age difference will for sure play in for Hornsby. As far as him being anointed the starter, I mean, it when you talk to Kinney and everything, they're going to say the coach thing. There's competition. There's a competition. It does seem like he is their guy. They're not outright saying it, and they're still giving. There's 3 other quarterbacks on the roster. Well, the one that's really competing with him is CJ Rogers. He transferred in from Baylor late last summer. Didn't get to throw a pass last season. I didn't even take a snap last season. He hasn't even taken a collegiate snap yet, but he's made some headway in the spring, had some really good plays. They would put Hornsby out with the first unit, but then they were giving Rogers some first unit reps as well. And Rogers was actually the one quarterback to throw a touchdown pass the whole day. Hornsby didn't throw a touchdown pass, had some great passes that set up some touchdowns that got him into the red zone, specifically a nice 37-yard bomb to Cole Wilson, who's also an Incarnate Word transfer. So we saw some good things from him. But Rogers came out and played well as well. I mean, as much as I'm talking about no turnovers, that goes for CJ Rogers as well. That being said, I think it's pretty safe to say that Hornsby is the number one guy here. I don't think I don't think that's to say that Rogers is completely out if things go south. I think if something happens, they're pretty confident in Rogers as well, especially from how Kinney talks about him. He says it's a good problem to have, two quarterbacks that are pretty capable.
Along with Keff Ciardello from the Austin-Statesman, beat writer for the Texas State Bobcats. It is Locked On Sunbelt, your team every day. You expect it to get better and more consistent because that'll be really interesting because it is a ridiculous schedule to begin the season. And then it loosens up a little bit. They actually have a 3-game homestand before wrapping up with what could be a huge ball game. I think they host, did I see that right? They host South Alabama at the end of the season. That could have all kinds of implications for both teams. So it will be interesting because Baylor's in that, UTSA is in that. We'll see what's left of Jackson State. Nevada's not that good, but then they get Southern Miss to start the Sun Belt. So it'll be interesting to see if they can build and keep their heads up if things aren't going as smoothly as GJ Kinne wanted to, but mostly because the opposition is really good.
Yeah, no doubt. This is one of the tougher schedules I've seen the Bobcats get. It's definitely a tough slate for a first-year coach. I mean, even when you're talking about the non-conference, those are some heavy hitters as well. Even when you say Nevada's not very good, it's a team that beat Texas State last year. So I mean, it's
Right,
still.
right.
But an interesting deal with Nevada is Incarnate Word, where GJ Kinne was coaching, beat that Nevada team. So I'm actually kind of intrigued by that Nevada one. That being said, that whole schedule, it's tough. It's a really tough one. I don't know exactly where it lands on the strength of schedule deal. I know one publication put it out where it's like the 29th toughest in the country. It's not like an official one, but that was one that something I just saw on Twitter. That's
Yeah, but
pretty
I mean,
tough.
even if that's unofficial, right? That everybody in the SEC has a hard schedule. Everybody in the Big Ten has a hard schedule, and that's almost that's what is that? That's like 30 teams right there. So
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And I mean, and that's even without App State on Texas State's schedule. They had
right,
them last season, but
right.
it's a tough one. It's a tough one for the Bobcats. That's why, and that kind of goes into when we were talking about the expectations earlier for GJ Kinne. It's going to take longer if they really have success this season. It's going to be it's going to be some really close games, some really tough opponents. But I think if it's not, a 10-win season or what some fans are expecting, I don't think that's a true knock on Kinne or a loss for this team. I think
Right.
the closer they can get to 500 and over 500 is big, because this program has not done that since 2014. So that is I think a more realistic goal for this program than to look at Incarnate Word and see them in like the semifinals of the FCS playoffs and all that.
Right.
I think it's just getting closer to a winning program.
If they can
That's
put
going to
up
be
some
big for this team.
points, if they can put up some points, I'm a big believer. If you're not going to win, you got to be exciting. You can't be
Right.
boring. So if you can put up some points, whether it's consistently or you're taking advantage of the explosiveness, and your defense is young, you say the defense is going to be pretty good. You can be aggressive with the defense, and I'd much rather. This is me. I'd much rather lose, 45, 35 than lose 28-7.
Yeah, I mean, from I don't know how coaches feel. I mean, a loss is a loss, I'm sure, to them. I know from my perspective, I'm with you. I mean, I at least want to see something exciting, some points on the board, and Texas State fans were kind of promised that with Jake Spavital. He was considered this quarterback guru with all these NFL quarterbacks in his tutelage over the years, and it just never came to fruition. That system just never really worked, and of course, there was some inconsistencies with who the offense coordinator was. It changed 3 times by the time it ended.
Right.
When Spavital's last year, there was no offense coordinator. He was the offense coordinator. And so the offense was kind of a mess after fans were promised something else, and it was a big letdown for a lot of them. So I know Texas State fans and myself are for the most part with you, that it would be nice to, if they're not winning, they're at least exciting. But obviously winning is the biggest thing. I mean, that's
Sure.
what everybody truly wants, that's looking at it, and especially the coaches and these players. But more exciting, I do think they are going to be more exciting this season.
All right, one more time out. We'll wrap it up talking about the transfer portal with Keff Ciardello from the Austin-Statesman, the Texas State Bobcats beat writer. But we all know what week it is. It is the NFL draft week, and it's a great week. Locked On's NFL mock draft special is here, and it's bigger than ever. Follow along, all 32 teams' first pick in a 6-episode ultimate mock draft experience. Only Locked On can deliver. All episodes are available now on Locked On NFL Draft on YouTube or wherever you listen to your podcast. Oh, also, I do need to apologize again. The move and a new job has taken up a lot of my time. We will get back into this beginning this week. Appreciate your patience. Somehow we've gotten a couple more subscribers, so appreciate that. We're closing in on 200 subscribers. We got to recap all the spring football. We got, again, those 2 new basketball coaches, the assistants from Alabama at Georgia Southern and at Arkansas State we want to talk to. And baseball is ramping up. It was not a really good weekend for the Raging Cajuns. Ouch. And softball. And, the softball tournament is in a few weeks. here in Lafayette, Louisiana. The Cajuns will be hosting. So lots to do, and I appreciate you following along right here on Locked On Sunbelt. All right, let's wrap it up with Keff Ciardello from the Austin-Statesman. How much more work do the Bobcats have to do in the transfer portal? All right, a couple more questions for Keff Ciardello from the Austin-Statesman, Texas State Bobcats beat writers, Locked On Sunbelt, your team every day. I attended the LSU spring ball game, and Brian Kelly had mentioned they're not at 85 scholarships left. So, I guess that, the easy follow-up question would be they're going to be in the transfer portal. Is Texas State still going to go into the transfer portal? How many spots do they have? And what positions do you think they're looking for?
Oh, yeah. I mean, it's interesting you say the 85 scholarship allotment. I didn't realize that for LSU. That's pretty
Crazy
interesting for
crazy
a big,
going into year 2 for Brian Kelly, but it is what it is.
Yeah, they got time, transfer portal,
Right. He wasn't complaining. He was just stating a fact. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. But that was an issue for Texas State for a while when they made the jump to FBS was getting 85 scholarship guys on campus. I mean, there were times where they were in the high 60s, low 70s as far as scholarship guys. I know a different deal for GJ. When I checked with him around signing day, he said 83, 84 scholarship guys. And now there's been a few leaving the portal, but then they have also brought in others in the portal. So it's they're actually really close to that 85 number, but they are still looking for guys. Specifically, position is center. Silas Robinson, when spring football started, he was running with the first unit out there at center. By the time that the transfer portal window opened back up on the 15th, he entered his name, and he's off to Incarnate Word. A lot of switching back and forth between Texas State and Incarnate Word. They actually have 2 former Texas State players down there now with Silas Robinson and nose tackle Sammy Obiang, while Texas State brought in 7 players, 8 with another one who committed, but 7 officially so far. Kind of an interesting deal there. But yeah, and so it was. I lost. What was the initial question? I went off on Incarnate.
Just what they're going to be doing into the transfer portal and what positions.
Oh yeah, the transfer portal. Yeah. So they are definitely looking for guys. They, like I said, they just got a commitment from another Incarnate Word player, a DB that they're bringing in. Sean Holton is his name, and they actually had a quarterback from South Florida, Thomas Castellanos. From Central Florida, UCF. He just entered the transfer portal like 2 days ago, and he was actually at the spring game yesterday. Took a picture of GJ Kinne and posted on Twitter. So they're even looking at some quarterbacks. So offensive line, defensive back, quarterback. It seems like they're still trying to infuse this team with experienced players at multiple positions. The quarterback one really, really interested me. Castellanos, he's a kid out of Georgia. Had really big numbers there. Didn't play a whole lot for Central Florida, but at Central Florida is Gus Malzahn, and he's got a really good relationship with GJ Kinne because he was an assistant coach at Tulsa when Kinne played there. So they have a really good relationship. So yeah, they're definitely look. I don't know exactly how many. Every time I ask, hey, how many guys are you still trying to add? I'll get the answer. It's fluid. We're still figuring that out.
Absolutely.
But
did I see a picture of safety Torrey Spears playing wide receiver, or did I mess that up?
So Torrey Spears, that's
Marcus Spears' kid.
Right, correct.
Okay.
Now this was he's a 6'4" safety. That package, I guess, was not an offensive package, whatever that picture was. I got to the bottom of it actually yesterday. Because it looked like he was at first. And why we thought that is because Josh Eaton, who is they signed him from Oklahoma, the Sooners. He came over as one of the many transfers they brought over. He's a corner, but he's also playing some offense in this Texas State system. And he's done that before 2 ways. Wasn't doing that at Oklahoma, but he had done that before. And so we'd seen them kind of play around with these DBs, putting them at receiver and everything. Doesn't look like Torrey Spears is actually going to be playing receiver, whatever they were doing. They were just having fun with a package. But Josh Eaton, that is legitimate. A DB who is going to be in some packages. We even saw him yesterday. It was like the 3rd or 4th unit, pretty late in the day. And the way they separated offense and defense had white jerseys, offense had maroon jerseys. And then it actually got kind of confusing because it was Josh Eaton lined up at receiver, white jersey versus white jersey. We were like, it looked like he was 2 DBs out there. And then I was like, oh, Eaton's playing receiver. So well, I'm sure we'll see more of that when the season comes. Some tricky packages, but maybe not with Torrey Spears. I think he's pretty valuable at that safety position. You know, he's a big, tall guy back there that they want to keep him as healthy as possible.
Keff Ciardello from the Austin-Statesman. What is coming up this week? Draft, and you get a little time off. You get to take some time off, please, hopefully.
No, never. No time off ever. I mean, we got baseball, softball. I've got my podcast, Wouldn't Hour Get Bent. I'm always putting out episodes. But for this week out of the draft, there hasn't been a Texas State player drafted since 2015. And that was Craig Mager in the 3rd round and David Mayo in the 5th round. They had 2 guys who actually went in that draft. But this year, it's if anybody has a really good shot of getting drafted, it's Levi Bell. I mean, he burst onto the scene last year with playing it on the defensive line. Was just a TFL sack machine. Would stop the run. Was just doing a whole lot on that D line. And then when his pro day came around, he showed up in great shape. Ran something like a 4.56 40 for a guy who's weighing in at 260, 270, somewhere around there. I'm already forgetting how much he did. I think it was 34 reps on the bench press.
Wow.
Which that would have been the combine record for a fullback, because that is what they're looking at him for, is fullback, maybe a little defensive line, but it seemed like the scouts were really looking at him to play fullback. And we know in today's day and age with football, they don't usually draft fullbacks. So he may not get drafted, but he undoubtedly will sign somewhere. He will be on a team. I think there's a few other guys that can have a chance doing that as well, like Nelson and Banasaur. He's another defensive lineman. Nico Isidore, another defensive lineman. Linebacker London Harris. I know he had a tryout with the Houston Texans. Cordell Rogers is a safety corner. I know he was getting some looks at the pro day. He was a quarterback in high school, converted to DB. He's a pretty talented player. Don't know if anybody gets drafted, it'll be Levi, but it's pretty tough for fullbacks to get picked up in the first 7 rounds. So we'll see how that goes. Excited to watch all 3 rounds and see if anybody does go. I would be pretty excited. It's been a long time since I've gotten to write a story about a Bobcat being drafted.
There you go. Keff Ciardello from the Austin-Statesman. If we don't talk beforehand, hopefully we'll see you at Sunbelt Media Days in New Orleans, and we'll preview the Bobcats heading into fall camp. Really appreciate your time, Keff. Thank you so much.
Hey, absolutely. Always have a pleasure talking to you, Dave.